We talked about this last class, where we had to use the equation x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. I'll write that up here for you guys. Alright. So, let's make sure that we do this bell ringer, because I will be
The drill is now over. You may go back to your class.
Let's make sure that we are doing this on our little half sheet of paper, and I will be collecting this. I'll give you guys a few minutes to work on it. Let's not doodle, please.
Mine came up, but it's blurry.
What's K? What's K? Yeah. I don't either. He works though. You really think about it? Because if you really look at that really serious.
Alright, so let's make sure that we're doing both problems on the bell ringer, please. I see a lot of us that have done the first problem. Make sure I get the tablet back.
What did he pass? I know that is classic.
Okay. Then I didn't send it to you.
I'm not
Alright, guys. Okay. Now let's stop.
Oh yeah.
So anyone want to put an example on the board?
No. None of us. I'm nervous. I'm nervous. I'm nervous.
How about this? How about I'll do the first one, and then one of you guys do the second one?
Deal.
Okay.
I'll do the second one. I'll do the
Zero.
second one.
You will?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to plug in the information into the equation that's given here. The center is 6, 2, and remember, the center is h, k. So I'm going to replace the h with a 6 and the k with a 2, and then I'll replace the r with my radius, which is 4. So what we get is x minus 6 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 4 squared, which is 16. Now, in number 1, it tells you all the information that you need, but in number 2, instead of telling you the information, it kind of shows you the information by giving you a graph. Now, I've seen several of us complete this one already. I'll give you.
That's the answer to number 1?
Yeah.
Oh, I already got that. I thought that was. I had to do some numbers.
Did you get the second one? by not talking. All right, so Courtney identified that the center was at the point 1, 3. So the center is 1, 3. And the distance from the center to the circle is 2 units. So we have to plug in h and k, and then we have to square the radius. So we get x minus 1 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 4. That's a very good job. Go ahead and pass these forward, please. And we're going to begin our notes for today. Now, we're going to be doing this similar concept, but instead of being given the center and radius, we're going to be given the endpoints of the diameter of a circle. So we'll have to use formulas that we talked about in previous years, most likely in geometry or algebra 1, the distance formula and the midpoint formula. And that's going to help us write equations for circles. So we're still dealing with the same standard form of an equation of a circle. Still going to be using the same standard form that we used for the bell ringer. All right. So it's going a little slow today. Scene. All right. So today we're going to have 2 objectives. We're going to write the equation of a circle given the endpoints of its diameters. We're going to have to review the distance formula and the midpoint formula. Ultimately, we need to find the length of that diameter, and then given the length of the diameter, how do we find the radius? Just divide by 2. And then find the center. We know the midpoint of a diameter is going to be the center of a circle. And then we're going to do a real-world problem. So here are the distance formulas and the midpoint formula. Now, the distance formula, what we do is we take the x's, we subtract them and then square it, and then add that to the difference of the y's and then square it, and then take the square root. I would say that the distance formula and the midpoint formula, they look more complicated than they really are. So the midpoint formula, all I'm really doing is I want to take the average of the x's, comma, the average of the y's. So it's x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2. But it's much easier to remember it if I just say, okay, average the x's, average the y's. So go ahead and look at an example. So it's asking us to write the standard form of an equation for the circles, and it's giving us the ends of a diameter. So the ends of the diameter in problem number 1 are negative 6, 3, and negative 2, 12. Ultimately, what I need to figure out is the center and the radius. So we need to find the center. I don't know why it's going so slow. The center.
Reset, babe.
Yeah, try counter.
Reset? Where's the reset button?
Like at the bottom. Or at the thingy.
This has never happened before. Maybe I'll just close a couple things.
No, I'm not.
Awkward everywhere.
All right, hopefully that helps. All right. So we still have the spinning wheel, which is not good.
So if I use the rest of why this is well.
That's fine. Make it quick. Okay. So let's go ahead and start talking about how we would do this. I'll work it out over here on the whiteboard. So the ends of the diameter are -6,3 and -212. So I need to use the distance formula and the midpoint formula. So the first thing I want to do, I need to find my center, and I need to find my radius. All right, so to find the center, what I need to do is use the midpoint formula. So I need to average my x's and average my y's. So find the center, I need to average my x's and average my y's. So looking at problem number 1, what is the average of my x's? My x's are -6 and -2, and I need to average them together. So add them up, divide by 2. Someone raise your hand and tell me what you get. What? Good, -4. Okay. Now I need to average the y's. We have 3 and 12. 3 and 12, so I need to add them up and divide by 2 to take the average. What? You can say it's a fraction or it's a decimal. Yeah. Yeah, 7.5. All right. So finding the center, that's a little bit easier than finding the radius because we're just averaging the x's and averaging the y's. To find the radius, I'm first going to need to find the length of the diameter by using the distance formula on those 2 points. So the distance formula is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, and then take the square root of that whole thing. So I just need to plug in my numbers. So what I have is x2 is -2 and x1 is -6. So we have -2 minus a -6 squared plus my y2 is 12 minus 3 and then squared. So I'm just plugging in these numbers into the distance formula. Now, if I take -2 minus a -6, that's like doing -2 plus 6, because 2 negatives turn into an addition. So what we get is -2 minus -6 gives me +4. And then 12 minus 3 squared, that's 12 minus 3 is 9. All right, 9 squared. So now I need to do 4 squared. Someone raise your hand and tell me what 4 squared is. Anastasia? Good. And what is 9 squared? What? 81. And then what is 16 plus 81? Anastasia? Good. So we get that the length of the diameter is equal to the square root of 97. All right? But if I know the length of the diameter, how do I find the length of my radius? Yeah, I need to divide it by 2. So my radius is going to be the square root of 97 divided by 2. Okay? So, now what I need to do is plug in this information into my calculator to figure out what the square of the radius is. And I'm going to want it as a fraction and not as all right. So to type in the square root of 97 over 2 quantity squared, what we're going to want to do is hit alpha y equals enter, and then put the square root of 97 in the numerator and 2 in the denominator, and then we'll want to square from there. I would show it up here, but it's frozen. So hit alpha y equals enter, put the square root of 97 in the numerator and 2 in the denominator. So, has anyone figured out what we get when we square our radius? And then, can we write that as a decimal? We need to square it. We need to, because it's the radius squared. And then we want that as a decimal, or as a fraction. So hit math, enter, enter.
97.
Right, so what we get r squared to be is going to be 97 over 4. So I know that this is my radius, and my radius squared is 97 over 4. So now I have all the information I need to plug it into this equation. So I know that h is -4, k is 7.5. So what we have is x plus 4 squared plus y minus 7.5 squared equals 97 over 4. All right. Now hopefully my computer has restarted and will work for me.
Oh, we had it frozen because I went
All right.
97 over 4 is our radius.
That's the radius squared. So 97 over 4 is the radius squared. It's what goes into the standard form of the equation. All right. So I'm going to leave this up here on this board, and while my computer finishes its boot up process, I'm going to go ahead and work out the second problem, and then we'll be able to do the third and fourth problems up on the smart board, hopefully. So it's the same process. This one's going to work out a little bit simpler because my x's are the same. So I need to first identify my center and radius. Can anyone remind me what formula I need to use to identify my center? I need to use the midpoint. Good. Now, if I average my x's, what do I get?
-4?
Right, the average of -4 and -4 is just going to be -4. So my center has an x-coordinate of -4. And now I need to average my y-coordinates. So 12 and -2. What do I get if I average 12 and -2? What was it, Elgin? Did you say something? Well, what what do we get if we add 12 and negative 2 together? 10, and then 10 divided by 2? It's 5. So my center is at the point -4, 5. Now I need to find my radius. Alright, to find the radius, I'm first going to need to find the diameter using the distance formula. So, I first need to find the diameter by using the distance formula. So, we have the diameter is going to be equal to the square root of the difference of the x squared plus the differences of the y squared. So, we have -4 minus a -4 squared plus 12 minus a -2 squared. Now, what is...
Students and teachers, pardon the interruption. These students need to report to Mrs. Burnett's office, please. Joshua Brown, John Taya Buckner, Taylor Donovan, Luke Gray, Josh Lasky, and Eric Rockwell. Thank you.
All right. So we have -4 minus a -4. What's that give me? Gives me 0. And then we have 12 minus a -2. What?
Isn't this supposed to be y2 first?
You can do it either way. It's just as long as you take the differences of the x's and the differences of the y's and square it, it turns out to be the same. Because if I did it the opposite way, you would just get positive or negative, and then when you square it, it makes the difference go away. So, when I do 12 minus a -2, I get 14, and I need to square that. Well, I know that the square root and the square are inverse operations, so they cancel each other out, and I'm going to be left with my diameter equaling 14. Well, if my diameter equals 14, what's my radius going to be?
7.
Yeah, it's going to be 7. All right. So, now that we have our center and radius, it's going to be pretty easy for us to identify the equation. And I'm going to put it on the smartboard now, because it seems to work. All right. So, given a center and radius of -4, 5, and a radius of equal to 7, we can put that into the standard form of the equation of a circle. X plus 4 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 7 squared, which is 49. Okay. So, sorry about the technical difficulties. This should be good to go now. So, do we have any questions about this? I know it's been a little bit different having to use the whiteboard for these two examples, but fortunately we have 2 more to go, and it'll be a little bit back to normal. Yeah. Okay. So far, any questions about this?
Wait, how did you say you were getting this center?
The center by using the midpoint formula, which is right here, the average of the x's and the average of the y's.
Okay.
So, same process here at number 3. I need to identify my center and radius. So, to identify the center, I need to average the x's and average the y's. So, can someone raise your hand and tell me what the average of the x's is going to be here? What? Good. Can someone different help me out finding the average of the y's. Remember, just adding the two numbers together, the y coordinates. Good, -6. So my center is at -4, -6. And can someone remind me what I need to do to find the radius? What? I need to use the distance formula to find the diameter, and then I'll be able to divide the diameter by 2 to get my radius. So we have the diameter is equal to the square root, and then I need to take the difference of the x's and square it, differences of the y's and square it. So we get -2 minus a -6 squared plus -1 minus a -11 squared. Now, notice again, I did x1 minus x2 instead of x2 minus x1. It doesn't really matter because if I take -2 minus -6, it gives me a +4. But if I had done -6 minus a -2, it would give me a -4. And when I square it, I get 16 either way. So we're going to get 16. And then what is -1 minus -11? -12. And then what do we get when we square 12?
If you minus a negative, shouldn't it be a positive then? No.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You're right.
Good job.
-1 minus -11 should give me
10.
10.
10 squared is 100.
And then what is 10 squared?
100.
Yeah, 100. All right. So now that I have -16 plus 100, I need to add those two together. And I get the square root of 116 is equal to my diameter. All right. So my diameter is the square root of 116. Given that, how can I find my radius?
My laptop died.
Laptop.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a piece of paper. Yeah. You divide it by 2. So my radius is going to be equal to the square root of 116 over 2. But let's figure out what the radius squared is, because that's really what we're interested in when we're using the standard form. So I'm going to go to my calculator. It might take it a second to open up after the reboot. All right. So we have alpha y equals enter. Get us that fraction bar. We're doing the square root of 116 divided by 2. And then we're going to square this. And it's 29. So the radius squared is equal to 29. It's right here. So the radius squared is equal to 29. Now that I know my center and my radius squared, I can just plug it into my equation. So we get x plus 4 squared plus y plus 6 squared equals 29. Any questions about this one? Questions about number 3?
No, sir.
All right. Let's go ahead and look at number 4. So I need to do the same thing. find the center and my radius. What formula do I need to use to identify my center? Right, I need to use the midpoint formula. So, how do I find the x-coordinate of the midpoint between those 2 points?
X2 minus X1 over 2.
Right, and what do I get, Bethany?
1 and negative 6.
Okay, for the x I get 1. And then for the y, I need to take the average of 14. Wait a second. Are you sure about that?
Negative 4 minus 14.
We're going to add,
18.
we're averaging 5 and 7. We're averaging 5 and 7. Think what? 6. And then we need to average 14 and negative 4. Think what? Get 5. Alright. So the center is at 6, 5. Now I need to find my radius. And then ultimately my radius squared. Alright, so I'm first going to find the diameter using what formula? Good, the distance formula. So the distance formula is equal to the square root of the differences of the x's squared. So 5 minus 7 squared plus 14 minus negative 4 squared. Alright. Well, what is 5 minus 7? Negative 2. So we get negative 2 squared plus, what is 14 minus a negative 4? What? It's going to be same as 14 plus 4, so it's going to be 18. Now, I need to actually square these. So negative 2 squared, negative 2 times negative 2, negative times negative gives me a positive. It's going to be 4. So it's the square root of 4 plus 18 squared is 324. All right. Now, I need to add those numbers together, and I find that my diameter is equal to the square root of 328. Now, there's no reason to simplify here, because whenever we plug this into the standard form of the equation, we're going to be squaring it anyways. So, if I know that my diameter is a square root of 328, how can I find my radius? Divide by what? Okay. Yeah, I need to divide by 2. So we get square root of 328 divided by 2. Now, if I type that in the calculator, square it, what do I get? I'm just going to replace the 116 with 328. What should we get? It's not a guess. We have calculators in front of us. We get 82. Alright, so my radius squared is 82. Alright. Now that I know my center and my radius squared, I can just plug that information into my equation. And I get my answer to be x minus 6 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 82. X minus 6 squared. Okay, so we just have one example left to go through. And sorry, this is taking a little longer than usual because of my technical difficulties. So, can I get a volunteer to read this prompt for me, please? Did you say say you wanted to read this? Anybody? You know, if nobody wants to read, I can do it, I suppose.
I have a question. I have a question.
I got you next time.
Sure.
Can you write both the equations on the board, like the distance and
Sure.
like on the whiteboard that way?
On the whiteboard?
Yeah, so like it doesn't clear off whenever you go to a new page.
Sure. It's on the notebook handout that it's in your PowerPoint, but so we have distance is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And then the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. Sure. All right. So, no one wants to read? All right. So, Marcus is in the process of making blueprints for a new house. Keyshawn, next word, please. Marcus is in the process of making blueprints for a new house. He is drawing his blueprints on the standard coordinate plane, and he has decided that he'll be putting a pool in the backyard of his new house. The end points of the diameter are at -13.8 and -3.8. It wants us to write an equation that represents an equation for this pool. And then it also asks us to assume that the pool is going to be 6 feet deep and to determine how much water the pool will be able to hold. So I'm going to need to use the same concepts I've been using on the first 4 examples to find the equation. And then I'm also going to need to apply information from last year's class geometry to find how much water the pool can hold. So let's start by identifying the center and the radius. And then we'll need to know what the radius squared is equal to. All right? So I know that the endpoints of the diameter are at -13.8 and -3.8. So in order to find the center, I need to average the x's and average the y's. So -13 plus -3 over 2. Well, -13 plus -3 is going to give me -16. Divided by 2, we get -8. And then the average of 8 and 8, well, the average of 8 and 8 is just going to be positive 8. Now, to find the radius, I first need to find the diameter and divide it by 2. So we have the diameter is equal to the square root of -13 minus a -3 squared plus 8 minus 8 squared. Well, I know that 8 minus 8 is going to be 0, and 0 squared is going to be 0. So this part, it can just disappear. It doesn't matter, because if I take something and add 0 to it, it's just going to be that same thing. So I just need to take -13 minus a -3, which is going to give me, well, since it's 2 subtractions, I have to add. So it's going to be -13 plus 3, or -10. -10 squared. Now, -10 squared gives me 100. But then the square root of 100 is equal to 10. So the length of my diameter is 10. Now, if my diameter is 10, what's my radius going to be? It's going to be 5. And then what is my radius squared going to be? It's going to be 25. All right. So, given the center and radius, let's go ahead and write out an equation for this circle.